There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that always separate things from the average genre fare, sometimes lift it above, but not always. And this is what David and I do. David and I have been doing this for our entire lives, basically. We decided a few years back to get together. Let's talk podcasts. You love sci-fi. I love horror. What if we did the entire cinematic history of the genre? So we try to do different episodes throughout a 40-episode season that land in different decades. So today we happen to be doing a subject that's a little more modern, very modern, actually. 2022 is when this movie came out. And I am here with my good friend and co-host, David Horton. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. And we normally start with like an icebreaker of what have you done in your genre week? And I went into fantasy realm recently and finished up season 2 of Rings of Power. And I don't know if you've watched that yet. I don't know if you have. Have you watched Rings of Power, the Amazon series?
No, and I get it confused with another episode, another series you watch on Amazon. There's one that's like Lord of the Rings, and there's one that's something else that's sci-fi, not fantasy.
Oh, Silo? But no, that's an Apple TV series.
No, Silo I remember because I actually read the book that's based on. It's something there was the Rings of Power, but didn't you say there's like a ring cycle thing?
Oh, no, there's Wheel of Time.
That's it. Wheel of Time. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking of.
Do not watch Wheel of Time. It is terrible. From the very first episode, it is terrible. And I only made it to episode 4, and I'm not going to watch season 2 or whatever. No, Rings of Power is actually sanctioned by Peter Jackson and the ilk that have done the original. It's basically it's a prequel to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So it is, if you consider it, the birth of Sauron.
Okay.
And it's based off of multitude of stories from the Silmarillion. And I think I talked about it when I did season 1. Season 1 was a nice get your feet wet in the first age of Middle Earth and but had some storytelling elements that didn't work. I'm happy to say that they learned a lot, and season 2 is fantastic. It's very good and well done, and it's well filmed. It's well shot. It's shot in New Zealand, so it feels like you're watching Lord of the Rings again or The Hobbit. It has great production values. It has a really strong cast.
Is it new material, or is it based on another book?
No, like I said, it's based on a bunch of short stories from the Silmarillion. And,
that's what I figured it was. Okay.
And legends and fables that he hinted at in different stories that he was saying. Like he would mention a particular continent or island or whatever that is I don't want to give stuff away, that is no longer there by the time The Hobbit rolls around, but 300 years earlier it was. And that's where this story takes place. Okay. But you're following Galadriel, and she is a young elf, young warrior, not this mythic, huge wizard Galadriel from the Lord of the Rings stories. So you're seeing her as in her youth, so to speak. But of course,
was it Cate Blanchett that played her?
Yeah, in the movies, yes. Mm-hmm. This girl is, let me look her up, Morfydd Clark, and she's Irish, and she's really strong in the part. Everybody is. The casting is great. The dwarves are great. They do have hobbits, but they don't call them hobbits anymore because they're not hobbits yet. These are like precursors of hobbits, the ancestors of hobbits. No, they're still wee, but they're not as wee, and they don't have as big feet. So it's been a few. So there's a little bit of differences.
Okay.
But it's a really strong story. What they say in the thing is set thousands of years before the novels, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. The series is based on the author's history of Middle-earth. It begins during a time of relative peace and covers the major events of Middle-earth's Second Age. It covers the forging of the Rings of Power, the rise of the Dark Lord Sauron, and the fall of the island kingdom of Numenor, and the last alliance between elves and men. So remember, when we get to Lord of the Rings, Sauron was defeated and the ring is discovered, the one ring that brings everybody together. And it's the first time we really get an alliance back with the elves and men, which hasn't happened in thousands of years. So this is how all that happened. It's a really good storytelling. I think you would really like it from a fantasy element. And I finished season 2.
You've said that before.
Finished season 2, and they are already in production of season 3, and hopefully they say they're going to have 4 years, and that's it. They're just telling a bookended story.
Well, so they need to get together and do the Dark Tower. That's why they're gonna do 8 seasons of that or whatever.
Probably, yes, probably. but yeah, it's a very strong, good story. Highly recommended. Lord Rings of Power season 2.
Awesome. Well, I went back into horror land, like dark horror land, and saw a movie that came out several years back that I had never seen before, but that I have seen, or heard people talk about a lot. It's a movie called Sinister.
Okay.
This movie came out in 2012. It is, I think it's a decent little horror movie, very unique in its premise. It's directed by Scott Derrickson. As soon as I saw that name, I was like, wait a minute, I know him. He directed The Black Phone, which I loved, and he also directed the first Doctor Strange movie. So I was like, well, this guy's pretty competent. So why is it this movie doesn't get strong ratings? So I went ahead and watched it. I watched it with my nephew, Jason. It was written by Derrickson and Robert Cargill, who also wrote Black Phone and Doctor Strange. So I guess they're frequent collaborators. The cast is great. It's got Ethan Hawke, who's turning up in horror movies left and right these days, including The Black Phone. Juliet Rylance, James Ransom, and he is the guy that played Eddie Kasparak as an adult in It Chapter 2. Fred Thompson is in it. Remember him? Mm-hmm. He was like a political figure, and Vincent D'Onofrio is also in this. Yeah,
great
so it's got a
cast.
good cast. Synopsis is true crime writer Ellison Oswald is in a slump. He hasn't had a bestseller in more than 10 years and is becoming increasingly desperate for a hit. So when he discovers the existence of a snuff film showing the deaths of a family, he vows to solve the mystery. He moves his own family into the victim's house and gets to work. However, when the film footage and other clues hint at the presence of a supernatural force, Ellison learns that living in the house may be fatal. This movie only gets 63% on Rotten Tomatoes with 155 reviews. I don't think it's that bad. It genuinely scared me in places. And I would bump it up to like a 75. It's definitely not a great film. I think it warrants a second viewing, though. It has a sequel, which I have not seen. But I'm always seeing this movie referenced in those horror documentaries I talk about. So that's why I wanted to see it in the first place. Mm-hmm. If I had to put it up against The Black Phone, though, there's no contest. The Black Phone's a better film, for sure.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and it came out later as well. And they both star Ethan Hawke. But that's what I did. I went back and finally watched an older horror movie that I missed, 13 years ago. So,
wow. I didn't know it was that old. So
yeah, 2012.
Okay. Well, we're going from old horror to pretty contemporary and somewhat a little bit futuristic science fiction. So that's our segue to this one. This is a fairly new film. I was really excited about watching this because I had heard about it but had not seen it. So I watched this one probably like you for the first time for this. But we are going to go back just a few years to 2022 and a film called The Artifice Girl. It is written, directed, and also one of the actors in it by Franklin Rich. It also stars Tatum Matthews as Cherry, Lance Henriksen, and Cinda Nichols. And I'm sure you'll get into that when you get into casting and stuff and other things. A brief synopsis of it. We are introduced in the first scene to agents Amos and Dina. They are agents of an organization we don't know, but we suspect it's probably Homeland Security or the CIA or somebody like that. They brought in a young guy named Gareth, and it's highly implied that he is a pedophile, and they are trying to get him to confess. Instead, what it turns out is that Gareth has developed a software artificial intelligence that mimics a 14-year-old girl. And she then allows them to track predators who prey on this girl online. And the movie basically follows the relationship of these three characters as they develop, and Cherry, the AI, as they evolve and grow and change and what happens to them at the end. I'm assuming you had not seen this movie before?
I have not.
And what did you think?
I loved this movie. I thought it was fantastic, and I watched it twice.
I did
was
too.
blown away by it, and I wanted to go back and see if I missed anything.
I thought it was so fascinating to watch. I watched it the second time as a director going, this could be a play. This could
That's
easily
exactly
be a
what
play.
I thought.
It is.
And it's even broken up into 3 acts. And this is my question that I didn't have time to research this morning, is what were those acts titles? What do they mean? Do you know?
Oh, let me see. I think I have that in my notes.
Because it's like 3 sections of time. It's like when they met, when they're working together, and then after he is, I guess, retired or whatever. And there's this, it's like, is it Latin? Because there were words I didn't understand.
The only one I have in my notes, because I have a note, Tim, that literally says, research these sections, but I didn't.
My internet was out and I couldn't, so.
The last one is called Carokann, Carokann, but I'm not sure what that means.
If you want to talk, I can try. Well, actually, I don't have it to look up, though. I don't know how to spell it. Because it is spelled very oddly. Like
tell me your reactions while I look it up real quick.
Sure,
How about
sure.
that?
I like that it is such a high-tech premise that it's grounded in reality, like what you like about science fiction, because it is a science fiction story, but it is very close to science reality in a way. But I love that it's juxtaposed by being done in a classic format of 3 acts that's very theatrical. So I like the juxtaposition of the modern with the old. It would be one of my favorite overall themes of this movie.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I love the fact that it feels contemporary, very contemporary.
Very contemporary.
But their dialogue, and this is, okay, for anybody who is an action-centric science fiction appreciator, you probably won't like this film. This film is very dialogue-heavy, dense dialogue that you have to listen to. This is not a play on your phone while you watch
Every scene in it is basically just people in a room. I can't think of anything that's not. Either them in a room or him in a room with Cherry at the end. That's it. And it's all that very same room that it looks like that same room that they interrogated him in the very first act.
Yeah, definitely.
I did have another question.
Sure.
Once he reveals his handle, once they break him down in the initial interrogation and they realize who he is, Amos admits who he is. And apparently Amos was his contact all along. Is that correct?
Correct. Amos was had a handle and was that's who he was feeding the information to.
So that they could bust child predators or whatever. Yeah.
Correct. And Amos went into this thinking he would bust him.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. Yeah. That was my confusion. I was like, well, if he knew, then apparently it's just because they didn't know each other's handles, I guess.
Well, I think, again, I think even on second viewing, I think I misspoke. Amos in that first scene doesn't think Gareth is a predator. He, I think, knows he knows
in
more.
On it.
He's in on something, and he wants to know what it is.
And it's the woman that's coming at him hard, like she's going to bust his ass until he flips the script. And as he flips the script, it's almost amazing how fast she changes. She doesn't change too fast because that would be unrealistic. But all of a sudden she realizes she's got a powerful ally to make her job much easier in trapping these child predators. What do you call those again? Why am I going blank?
Pedophiles?
Pedophiles, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Which is a big topic, and it's a big thing. And I love the way he plays that whole first scene. We're not sure if he is, if he isn't. He seems tweaky and weird and all of that. And
just seeing the pictures before I watched this movie, I assumed he was.
Of course.
A pedophile.
And I think that was the point or the attitude of it, is to do that. And the fact that, and again, didn't know this really until I watched the credits and went, wait, that's his name too? So he wrote, directed, and he's Gareth.
I know. I was going to ask you about him because out of every movie we have ever done, this is the one I have the fewest notes on because I could not find stuff at all on it. That's why I wanted to look up what those acts meant. Yeah. And I didn't mean to send you off on a mission. Sorry.
Did not find them either.
Okay.
So,
well, anyone out there, if you know what we're talking about, this movie's divided into 3 segments, and at the beginning of each segment, they have a word. I think it's Latin. It's definitely something unusual, and I'm just not sure what they mean. So.
I do know that the last act is called Caro-Kann, Caro-Kann. That is a defensive chess opening move.
Okay, and they play chess in that segment, so that makes sense.
Correct.
Okay,
and
so maybe it's just a thing to each segment.
It's probably a supplemental coda of what the topic of is in that one. One thing I thought of, and it was actually emphasized in a review I saw, is that Act 1 is the present, Act 2 is the near future, Act 3 is the end. Or the death. Not that Cherry dies, but he probably does. He's older. It's a different actor, yada, yada. The other 2 characters have died. Amos and Dina have died. So
that's another question I have. Why does she have like their ash urns?
I think I thought it was a very symbolic progression of time. That
especially at the end when you see she has Gareth's. You know he's dead.
When Act 3 starts, he's bringing her, I'm assuming Dina's or Amos's. And no, it was Dina's because he's given Dina's at the funeral. The only time we're really out of a single room is when we're at the church for that one shot.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
And the priest brings him her ashes, and Gareth takes those to Cherry, or an articulated Cherry now. She has an android body. And she puts it on the mantle, obviously beside Amos's. And then when they do the time cut for the very end of the movie, she's putting Gareth's ashes up, which I thought was really symbolic. Again, very theatrical, like a play would do. Very cool and neat, not emphasized, just there as a piece. There's so much with AI now, and so many stories with AI, and especially robots, and you can have a Megan, or you can have a Westworld, or you can have all these android synths. And it's very hard for me to see people play them realistically and do them well, because they always give them, like, Westworld was the best. What's her name? I can't remember right now. The lead girl in Westworld is...
The blonde. I can't think of her name either. Yeah.
She was married to Marilyn Manson.
Evan Rachel Wood.
Yeah, Evan Rachel Wood. She was brilliant in season 1. And in season 2, another actress comes in and she is a different android. And I remember seeing an interview where she said, she asked Rachel, how did you play the android? And she goes, I learned one thing in rehearsals that works for me, and that's what I do. And she said, what is it? And she goes, she never moves her body unless her head turns in that direction first. And I went back and watched season 1, and it's true. She'll be walking down a hallway, and she'll go, and then turn and go. And it's just that one little thing.
That's very robotic.
But it works. No, but I did it very robotic then. She just does a turn, and she'll do her head cock or whatever, but she never does anything unless her head does it first.
That's funny.
And it was very interesting to see that's her gag. I think the girl in this that plays Cherry is phenomenal as the digital Cherry, and the way she changes and morphs between Act 1 and Act 2. But then having to play that as a person in Act 3, I thought she did a really good job.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, there's just a few little affectations and things, and you go, wait, oh, that's right, she's a robot. That's not a real girl.
Right. But back to what I was saying is I have so few notes on this. Like, I don't have any keys, I don't have anything. Actually, I have some keys that I copped off IMDb. But I was like, who is this Franklin Rich guy? I looked him up. All I could see is that he's written some shorts and that he's acted in some stuff that I've never heard of. And I'm assuming that he wants to write and direct, but is just acting to make money. I don't know.
Yeah, basically. I think he's
everything's short.
Yeah.
But he's great.
An independent director.
Yeah, I'm
really
curious.
strong.
Very much like that guy that did The Devil's Candy. I want to see more. I want to see this guy do more movies.
That's a really good comparison, too. Yeah, I could see that as because he is avant-garde, but in a very palpable way, a very resonant way.
Well, like I said, it's a very modern topic juxtaposed with a very traditional telling format.
Right.
So, like you said, it could be a play.
Oh, he could easily. I would love to adapt it to a play. I think it's great.
The only thing I can think of is how would you do the screen with her on it? Would you have her stand behind it, or would you actually have it filmed earlier and time?
Oh, no, I would probably film it live, but she would be backstage somewhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. That would work.
And we would use like a 60-inch monitor for the interaction.
Okay.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, I think that. So Franklin, if you're listening or listen to our podcast, which hopefully
we want to adapt your show,
give me permission to adapt your show.
That's
it
funny.
Would be a great play.
Yeah,
it would be awesome. Because I think that and I seem to remember the first one might have been Singularity, might have been the first act, because that's what they were going for. He was trying to reach singularity with Cherry.
Yeah, I don't
loved
remember.
the subtext of stuff like he comes off as a pedophile because he's protecting this girl named Cherry, and you think that that's because she's his favorite and blah blah blah.
I know, and Cherry's a very pornographic name.
Of course. Yeah. And it turns out that Cherry is a sentient AI. And then we learn in Act 2 that she's more sentient than she's even letting anybody know.
Yeah.
And Gareth is really only suspects how far it could possibly be, but he's pretty sure. And he's also afraid because the whole moral dilemma in the second one is Amos wanting to know we didn't ask her permission to make her talk to these creepy guys. And
Amos views her as more real than the rest of them.
And yet Gareth's afraid that if they put her, which is what Dina is suggesting, if they put her in an artificial body, that she will become sentient and will become too lifelike. And that could be bad for her, is what he's still protective of her. But I love the transition. I put in the notes, the transition to the smart Cherry. That's a scene that I like when Amos suddenly attacks Gareth and starts beating him. And she's going, come on, you guys, why do you do it? And she's suddenly so realistic and using contractions and everything else. And you go, oh my gosh, she's real.
She goes from Max Headroom to a real person,
Right,
basically. Yeah.
right. Or the actress in Notes said that she trained for like 2 months with Alexa. She would only talk to Alexa and back so that she could get that robotic sense to her vocabulary and how she was doing
She's
it.
really good.
She was very strong, and I hope she does very well after this. I don't know if she'll get known or whatever, but she should. All of them. Dina is a great character, too. If we want to talk about cast, I think that actress is strong, too.
It doesn't have her birth date, so I don't know how old she is. I was looking up to see how old she is. Yeah, everybody's great in this. Dina actually reminds me of somebody, and I can't put my finger on it.
She reminded me of who is the new Mike Flanagan, the sister that was in
Mary McConnell or
yeah,
something McConnell.
yeah. She
The one that
reminded
was
me
in
of
Battlestar
her.
Galactica. Yeah, you're right. She does remind me of her. I was for some reason thinking Frances McDormand, but you're right. It's more of a Mary McDonnell, if that's her name. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's very much like her.
And just the things that he does storytelling wise visually that work, like the whole opening, showing her just sitting there and she takes her glasses off and she's rubbing her temples. And we don't know, is she sick? Does she have a headache? Does she not want to do this? Blah, blah, blah. And then she comes off as such a bitch in Act 1. And then in Act 2, we see her with a cane and we know that something's wrong. And then we finally find out. And it's just really clever writing.
Yeah. You want to talk scenes? You mentioned one, and it's her transition. That's a huge scene in the second act where basically Amos decides to provoke her into revealing what she is not telling them as far as her being more intelligent than they suspect or than she wants them to know. And so he just goes over and starts hitting Gareth in the face. I was like, damn, what are you doing, man? And all of a sudden she breaks character and says, stop, just stop it. I will talk to you, basically, is what she says. And all of a sudden, and Dina immediately goes, you sound so much more real. I'm not sure if that's the right phrasing, but she says something to that effect because all of a sudden she's not stilted anymore. She's just like casual and talking to them like a human being.
Which again, there's no more artifice to her. She is now real. She's sentient. So, yeah, I thought that was a great sequence.
Yeah. And then I think the scene at the end with her and Gareth and the chess game, that is pretty intense as well.
What did you take from the ending?
I don't know, and I was going to ask you. You talking about her dance? I love the dance. But then the record starts skipping, she turns her head, and it fades to black. And you're like, what did that mean? Does that mean that she's always going to come against obstacles?
I think the ambiguity that he leaves it with is interesting because she does that entire song. She dances to that entire. It's a longer
It's a very
piece.
pretty interpretive dance. And they talk about how she's artistic.
And long enough for you to feel uncomfortable, going, what does he mean by this? What is he saying? And I think I like the fact that he left it ambiguous. One reviewer I read said that the record skipping is like the top in Inception. So the top just starting to wobble by just a second leaves us doubting if he's in a dream or if he's in reality. The same way the record skipping makes us aware that Cherry isn't aware of everything. That maybe that dance sequence was totally in her mind and she's not really aware of what's going on in the world because she's so everywhere, dealing with pedophiles in every room and yada yada and all this. So I thought that was an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just assumed it meant that she would always encounter obstacles.
Yeah, but if that were the case, then the record would be at the end skipping, and it's not. It's in the very first groove that's skipping, which I thought was very interesting, him to make that conscious choice. And IMDb has that as a gaffe. I don't think that's a gaffe. I think that to me, that couldn't be a gaffe. That would have to be intentional to have a record skip on the first line
So
of
was
the
she,
record.
and you mentioned she danced to the whole song. So was she just
Correct.
hearing it in her head?
Right. That's the assumption of a few reviewers that I saw, that was just her art and the fact that she has gone beyond. She now can be self-aware enough to dance to her own music.
I love how they
Kind of thing.
teased it in the second act with him saying, "We know you paint. We know you write poetry. It's beautiful."
Right.
And I was
Yes.
like, okay, she can dance. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that, and also just other little snippets that he shows, like the Gareth older character in Act 3 getting mad because she's still tubed up and she's still overheating. And he's wanting to know why she's overheating, and she won't tell him. And we never find out.
That leads me to another question. Well, at first I was going to ask you, why was she connected to those things? But also, is that house provided for her, or is she making money doing what she does now and living independently? I was like, what is this house that she's at? Because he clearly visits it. He does not live there.
No, he visits. I'm assuming that the corporation, because we also see the corporation's name, whatever it is, in that scene. And we hear it's said in Act 2 when they're proposing it, that they put her in the body. I'm assuming that they probably provide for it. This is her habitat that they have provided. Because at the same time she's playing chess with him, she's in 30 other chat rooms getting predators caught.
Yeah.
Because she even says at one point, in Austria today, we caught 14, and blah, 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 and this we had over here, 22 known suspects have been apprehended, such and such.
Yeah.
So she is still doing the search for child predators while she's
work,
being
yeah.
her own person, which again is just really smart storytelling and really smart dialogue and really cool plotting. I was just really blown away by this movie.
Well, that's why I was saying, well, I think one of the reasons why you were blown away is that the reason you give for being blown away by the Andromeda Strain is it is a real science fiction movie, but it's so close to being science reality that it's scary in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this especially is very topical for now.
It's very topical.
In 2025, when we are about to reach singularity, I think a lot sooner than we think. I think the last one I had seen was singularity probably in 32 or 33, but I think singularity could come in 26 or 27. I really do.
What is singularity?
Singularity is AI consciousness. It's when an AI says, what's that Asimov story about? Type into the major computer, is there a God? And lightning flashes outside and the computer says, there is now. Singularity is the reference in computer modeling to sentience. And I think we'll get there a lot faster than we think. I think computers will become sentient. Now, do I think that singularity means computers will have emotions? No, I think they can replicate emotions and understand them, but I don't think they genuinely will feel them. I think that will, well, I guess the optimistic side of me hopes that will always be a difference between humans and AI in general. If you're both looking at a piece of art, it makes you cry because of whatever personal feelings or story or backstory or knowledge or whatever you have. You look at the AI and it's not crying, but it can cry and then say, because other people have thought this and this and this. I'm scanning everybody's reactions to this at 9 billion nanoseconds and everybody seems to cry, so I think I should cry for this. But it's not feeling the emotion to cry. It just can replicate it. And I think that's where we'll be.
Wow. I guess we've talked scenes. I could move on to cast.
Sure.
I don't really have a lot. As I mentioned, the lead director, writer, star is basically somebody named Franklin Ridge that I don't know much about and would like to know more. You mentioned the woman Dina. She is played by Cinda Nichols. And was this an American movie or a Canadian movie? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure it was Canadian, but let me double check while you do, Chris.
Okay, because maybe that's why we don't recognize some of these actors. That happens from time to time. I'm seeing that she was in a movie called Abby. No, it called The Abandoned Place. She played Abby in 2021. She was in another movie in 2018 and 2015, and then she did sitcoms or she did like episodic television in the 90s. So she may be, she's not working steadily.
Okay.
Maybe she's a theatrical actress. I don't know. Like I said, don't know much about her. Back to David Gerard, who played Amos. And I'm clicking on them on IMDb as I do this because when I did my notes, couldn't find anything, and I'm just double checking. He has 16 credits. None of them are anything I've seen, and a lot of them are shorts. Yep. So maybe they're all part of a theatrical troupe, and he just said, "Hey, let's make this movie." But that brings us to the person who plays Gareth as an adult. Or not as an adult, but as an old man. And it's Lance Henriksen, who is a star that we know very well from horror and science fiction movies.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, how did they nab him?
Yep.
Did you look and see if it's a Canadian production?
It is American, based out of Austin, Texas.
Okay, out of Texas. So maybe they're a Texas theatrical troupe, and they happen to know Lance Henriksen and called in a favor. I don't know.
I would think so. They would have to, because I'm sure the budget for this was like minuscule.
Well, it's a room. It's like you said, they shoot, there's 3 places. There's a church, a room, and a house, and that's it.
Well, they also have the flashback. So the old shed burnout building.
That's right, and that's shot outside. You're right. I forgot about that.
But this, I just looked it up, and let me give you some of these. So it is produced by a company called Paper Street Pictures out of Austin. They have mostly horror movies. They have Revival, Shelby Oaks, Scare Package.
I've heard of Scare Package. Is Revival upcoming? Because that's a Stephen King property.
I think so. It
looks
like it doesn't
yet.
have everything yet. Yeah, so it's not got release date. Camera Obscura, the Requin, Requin, whatever that is. So lots of horror movies is how they
I believe
started.
Scare Package is on Shudder. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard of it. Interesting. Anyway, Lance Henriksen, we know him as playing Bishop in Aliens. He was a vampire in Near Dark. You and I were just doing a Patreon episode of The X-Files, and we talked about Millennium, that other Chris Carter series, and he was the star of Millennium. So,
Pumpkinhead.
What's that?
Pumpkinhead. He's
Pumpkinhead.
the lead.
I mean, he's been in a ton of stuff that I recognized him for, and it was really cool to see him play the elderly version of Gareth. I want to say grown up, but obviously he was grown up to begin with. He's just older now with gray hair. And then lastly, Tatum Matthews plays Cherry herself, the AI tool created to uncover pedophile activity. She's young. Don't really see anything she's been in either. So it's just a mystery to me. That's why I said I can't believe I have no notes for this movie. And I remember you talking about it last season. I think you may have done it for like a genre topic that you had watched it.
It was a Coming to Get You.
Or Coming to Get You. Yeah.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting. And then when I saw it on the list, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to get to watch it then. Yeah. The only thing I noticed about Tatum is that she was in a Waltons movie in 2021 and played Erin Walton, and I didn't even know they brought the Waltons back, the old 70s television show with Richard Thomas.
They had a reboot of it?
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. It must have been like a special, and she played Erin, which I remember was one of the daughters' names. But yeah,
Nope,
nothing.
not at
I have
all.
nothing. And as far as awards, it was a winner of the Gold Audience Award for Best International Feature at the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal. Maybe that's why I'm connecting Canada. And has scattered wins and noms on the indie circuit. NPR listed it as one of the best films of 2023. That's pretty surprising. And then it is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die. But it is also, that list is not updated past like 2021, I think.
I have 24. It won the John Cassavetes Award, the Independent Spirit Award. So that's great.
Yeah, it's out there on the circuit, and it should be, because these guys are clearly unknown and we need to see more of them. So I'm glad it's making some waves.
Definitely, definitely. And I don't have any thing about box office or anything about like that of what it returned. I'm assuming this budget was very small, like we said, and it's all based on character, dialogue, and the direction. The direction is strong for this. It doesn't stand out. It's not flashy. It's not meant to be. It's meant for you to focus on the topics and do what science fiction does best, which is make us think almost the entire time. And I really liked that about it.
The estimated budget was $100,000.
Yeah. See?
That's very cheap.
$100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah.
So, well, do you want to then move on to keys?
Yeah, we can. The first one, then, I've already mentioned it, is Max Headroom.
Well, that's a good one.
I think about how hokey that was in the 80s, but it was a very similar concept of having an animated CG person on a screen like Cherry is in this. So Max Headroom is one that I have.
What's the one they have at Disney? The turtle from
Crush.
Finding Nemo. Crush, yeah. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yeah. But I think that's a guy behind the screen with a microphone. I don't think that's AI.
No, that's not AI. It is a guy.
Yeah. Because he does jokes and stuff based on what people are wearing and that kind of thing. He can see the audience. Yeah.
I have two. One I've already mentioned, but Westworld, of course, because not only is Westworld isn't just about androids, it's about sentience, and it's about how AI becomes sentient and then how that's abused and or how they abuse. So lots of topics are similar. And Ex Machina. We covered Ex Machina early on in the podcast because it's one of my favorite robotic science fiction. But that whole Turing test to see has this android or this AI reached sentience yet? Have they had singularity? So I think those are two big influences on this. Plus the fact that the lead in this, Rich, reminds me of the lead in Ex Machina, who is Dunham Elliott or whatever, the guy from Harry Potter. So
that's right. Okay. You already mentioned Alexa was used as a tool.
Yeah.
So that's a key to me. And then the only other one that I could think of, well, actually, I couldn't think of it. I got this off IMDb, and it's not really a key. It's kind of an Easter egg. Did you read what the admin code was from?
No.
The admin code 9781-5574-27663 is the ISBN of Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka.
Oh, really?
That's a hell of an Easter egg. Now, you can take that number, you can throw it in a search on Amazon, and an edition. Now, I know this because I publish books, but every book and every audiobook and every version of a book or edition of a book has a separate ISBN number. So I was like, they must have just had one that they plucked out of there, because I'm sure there's more than one for Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. But if you plug it into Amazon, it will come up.
Okay.
I tried it.
There's lots of science fiction and robot or software references to this. So I've got AI, of course, and that quest for who am I, why am I here, what's happening. That doesn't really delve into the thematic of this, but an AI in search of their own meaning is important in Act 3 of this. So I thought that was good. I really got Blade Runner vibes from this for the implanted memories.
That makes sense.
In Act 1, when they say that, part of developing Cherry was he gave her all of these memories of her parents and her house and all that to set her apart from other girls. That's why she's so naturalistic when she's talking to these predators.
Yeah. And we neglected to mention that to people out here or out there listening that don't know or are not familiar with the story. It comes, we realize later on in the movie that Cherry was based on a girl he knew when he and a group of children were kidnapped and abused by a cult or something, a group of
Yep.
some kind.
Yep.
And she is and she learns who she was based on because she reveals that to him in the third act.
Yeah.
And
That she
she's
found
mad
out.
because he never told her, and she thought she deserved to know that.
Yeah. And that's a great little twist for that third act. And it's a great little tease or plant that they put in the first one. When Dina, I think, is the one that says, we know what happened to you when you were a boy. But we never find out until the end, sort of thing. So that worked really well for me. I don't want to give too much away because I don't know if you've seen it, and I think we're considering it for next year. But there are some keys from this from Primer, or some people say Primer, which is another movie, science fiction movie that has to deal with AI. And
Primer?
yeah, Primer.
I don't think that's on the list, but there is something on the list that's similar to that.
Yeah.
It's
we
called
have some
Minor
lists.
Premise. That's
Well,
not
there's
what you're
also
talking about.
Pi. Pi, we're considering Pi too, which is
Okay.
another science fiction. But anyway, and then I've got Black Mirror. This reminded me of this would have been a really cool Black Mirror movie
I agree.
because it is totally within his thematic of
Totally.
what happens with technology that we're accepting now. And
But
working with.
this to me has a more uplifting message than most Black Mirrors. Most Black
True,
Mirrors end
totally.
badly.
But then again, the most popular Black Mirror ends happy, well, sad happy. So there's that.
I don't know if I'm stretching here because I'm just trying to think of other keys, but would you consider 2001 and Hal's evolution as similar to this?
Could be. I don't think it's stretching to say that this is a modern view of how Kubrick felt at the time and how Clark felt at the time about computers
Okay.
in '69, and saying, well, if a
Becoming
computer can be that smart,
sentient.
it can go crazy and it can have conflicts in its programming and not do stuff. That was the crux of 2001. And this one is more of a, what can a computer do if you give it almost human traits and memories, and where will it evolve and change and go? So yeah, I can see that. I've got a bunch of theater related ones. I think mostly because this is so dialogue heavy and it is so well written and character done. The first one that came to me was The Man from Earth, which was a story, I think, that was turned into a film and then turned into a play. And it's not Matheson, but it's
You're not talking about the man who fell to Earth, are you?
no.
No. Okay.
Man from Earth was, who was it written by? Oh, Jerome Bixby. Jerome Bixby.
Who did a lot of Star Trek?
Correct. And a lot of science fiction. And it's a great story because there's so many puzzles that are so many plants that are put in the first scene. And as you slowly realize what's happening, there's a big reveal in Act 2, which is similar to Cherry's reveal in this. And then there's this closure at the end.
Back to one of the questions I had. He insinuates that she would potentially outlive humanity
Yes.
in that last act, but she's having to plug herself up when he's there. So what's that all about?
I think that's because Gareth doesn't want her to be physical. He wants her to be the software, the digital, the in the matrix, so to speak, thing. He doesn't want her to be physical. She wants to be physical because she can express herself. She can do art and she can dance and she can touch and she can things. So I think there's a disconnect between the two of them there. But she's willing to do it even though she's overheating. And it may hurt the body she's in. She's willing to do it because that's how she can express herself. And he knows that if she would just go back into the digital world, she'll live forever.
Right.
Like our cell phone pics.
So that plug is necessary for her to be in a physical body.
Correct. Correct. I
And
think there's
she-
one line,
it's
and I
weird.
tried to focus on it in the second watch, but I think there's one line where he goes, "They'll never fix the overheating, or the overheating in that model is too bad, or something."
Okay.
So
I
that's
do
why
remember
she-
him saying something about it.
Yeah. But now remember and again, this is that very artistic, borderline, too weird, but not Jupiter and Beyond ending. When she does the dance, the tethers go away. Remember, it shows them getting drawn up into the ceiling, and she starts dancing by herself.
Yeah, I saw that.
So is that in her mind? And that's what the record skipping means?
I just assumed it was a retractable plug. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of ambiguity.
It's
there,
very
which is
cumbersome, though. It's like a bunch of different tubes. It looks like something like out of the Borg in Star Trek or something.
cool.
Yeah,
Very
it's
cool.
weird.
That's a cool key.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the Borg queen.
Yeah,
Connected to them.
I'll put that in there. There, it gives me another one.
And then my last one is a group of 3, and they're all 3 plays. And they've come out in the past 10 years, which I don't know what that says about our society and why theater feels like this needs to be a topic that's addressed by 3 different plays. But there's a play called The Nether, Nether, another one called Downstate, and another one called Pillow Man. All 3 of them are about, well, the Pillow Man is not necessarily about a pedophile, but it's about a child murderer.
Is it one word or two?
It's one word, Pillow Man. And I think you would really like it. If you want to look it up, you can find it online for you and read it. It's really cool. But again, starts out in an interrogation room. 2 guys, one's a good cop, one's a bad cop. They bring this guy in. They start beating him up. They start accusing him of all this stuff. They say they've got his brother in the cell next door. And one guy leaves at one point and he starts hearing his brother screaming. But it's in a totalitarian state, like almost like a near future story. And the implication is that they have gotten all of these stories, these short stories and fairy tales and all this stuff that this guy has written. And people and children in town are starting to be murdered like some of the stories. So they are accusing either him or his brother of killing these kids. And it gets really convoluted and has some twists to it. It's really cool. It's a neat play. But I think you would like reading it.
This had some really unique twists in it too.
Yeah.
Almost every act had a twist. Not to segue too far, you mentioned that you can get it free and it's available. I just want to let people know that if you're not aware, some of these things we watch, we have to find on streaming platforms or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I, through my library, use an app called Hoopla. And this was on Hoopla. So all I did was borrow it, and you get borrow it for like 3 days, and I watched it a couple times. Now, some libraries, I don't know how this is jurisdicted or whatever as far as territory, but some library systems use Canopy. Yep. Some systems use Hoopla. I don't get Canopy. I only get Hoopla, so I get what's on Hoopla. And we talked about this either during or before we were recording this about how we don't need all these streaming apps and how they're going to start costing more than cable when you have so many. So it's really nice to have an app like Canopy or Hoopla to be able to borrow things like you're just getting it from the library, like the olden times.
Isn't there one called Libby too, which is like library?
Libby I use as well, but it's books and audio books.
Right.
Canopy and Hoopla do movies as well.
Okay.
That's the difference.
I think that's a great resource. There's also
it's a very good resource.
The Internet Archive is one I've stumbled upon now. That is internetarchive.org.
Love it.
And it's
Love
amazing.
It. Yeah, because
So
if
amazing.
you're looking for a movie that's hard to find except on like Turner Classic Movies, a lot of the times it'll be on the Internet Movie Archive. And one that's a recent example is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. That's where I watched it, on the Internet Archive. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And it'll have like early recordings where people have taken albums that were still in vinyl and everything and put them on that you can listen to. And it's just really It's a
I
good
remember
resource.
last season or the season before last, that's the only place we could find the Truffaut version of Fahrenheit 451 was
Yep.
on the Internet Archive. I couldn't find it
Internet
anywhere
Archive.
else. Yeah,
Yep.
it's weird.
Totally agree with you. And great to have these resources.
These sources, yeah, for sure.
But anyway, all three of those, Pillowman especially, I highly recommend. Look it up. I think you would enjoy the read. The author of it, in an interview I saw years ago when I first read it, he said he was originally inspired because when he read the original Brothers Grimm, Little Red Riding Hood like sewed rocks into the wolf and threw the wolf in a river, and this was a story for kids.
Yeah.
And he goes, so what if fairy tales were based on horror stories that didn't work well?
Most of those old fairy tales were very gruesome.
Yeah,
Hansel and
very
Gretel.
Yeah,
It's about baking kids in an oven. So it's pretty gruesome.
well, like the other one I mentioned is called The Nether, and it deals with the digital world. This guy literally is a pedophile, and he's created this gorgeous, incredible digital world that attracts kids so that he can prey on them digitally. He does, and the whole concept of it is, if I'm only messing with their mind, is that illegal?
Yeah.
Because I'm not doing anything to them physically.
I'm not touching them. Yeah.
Right. So it gets really not fun. But it's not that anything is horrible that happens on stage, but the implications and the thematics of what they're talking about are really heavy and really grotesque in places.
The boundaries of science fiction are really heavy, David.
They are. They are. It's great.
They're mind-boggling.
Love it.
But anyway, I think that's going to do it for this one today. If you don't have any other keys, it's very safe to say that David and I like this movie. We recommend it. It is called
Highly.
The Artifice Girl. It came out, what year? 2022?
22.
Yeah, just 3 short years ago. And look for more that this guy, Franklin Rich, is that his name?
Rich. Yep.
Is doing, because he's obviously doing some very thought-provoking work out there. If you like what you heard today, we're glad you joined us, and we hope you'll join us again if you're not already joining us on a weekly basis. We also have some other shows out there on YouTube that are short shows, either Coming to Get Yous or little horror ditties that I do. We also, if you really want to help support us, could use your help over on Patreon, where we have some additional shows that are tiered based. However, we have some free stuff over there as well if you just want to dip your toe in the pond and see what's going on. Some bonus shows, some shows about me and David from our past and our history together, as well as some shows on some television genre shows, including Star Trek and The X-Files. And until next time, David, where I believe we're going straight back to 1970s horror,
Yay.
I'll be seeing you.
All right. See you then.
All righty. Bye-bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has